Welcome to Straits Talk, a podcast by Straits Interactive where we talk about the value, risks and constraints of data protection, data governance and generative AI. I am tech writer Grace Chung, and this is the second season of the podcast series. With me today, Alvin Toh, co-founder of Straits Interactive, and our guest, Sotek Meng, who is the Regional Data Protection Officer of Manpower Group. And over in Thailand, we have Dr. P, who is Dean School of Law at the University of Thai Chamber of Commerce and advisor to the Secretary General of the Personal Data Protection Committee of Thailand. You know, I've been reading several stories lately about the use of gadgets and devices has got generative AI embedded in it, you know. So do you have one yet?
Well, actually, I want to order one, but it's sold out. I can imagine, during December, there was a fantastic demo by this guy, Jesse Yu, who showed off this thing called the Rabbit. It's bright orange. But imagine it's actually just talking, and the thing could actually do things clicking on your apps without your intervention. All you do is just talk to it, right? So they are trying to revolutionize what they call large action model versus just language model.
Right. So it's an agent. So you just tell it the thing that you need to do, and then it will go run around and do it for you.
Yeah, I mean, this is where the next level, because now imagine interaction, right? You're just walking on the street, say, okay, I want an Uber with my friends. There are 6 of us. I want to go down to this particular restaurant. It will know that you need a large taxi or a large Uber. It knows where you are. It knows how to click on the app. And then after that, book it and then pay for it.
You know, these kinds of agents raise another new problem, that of all our personal data is in it. And so how do you, what's the challenge for service providers, So, Dr. P, digitalization is now rife everywhere, right? So the importance of data governance and AI governance, how do you get across this message? What is the, how are businesses looking at this?
Yes, I mean, looking at the example of what Alvin just talks about in that application that you just talk and then the apps just click right away, everything that you want to do, absolutely brings a lot of benefits for yourself, but it also raises questions about data protection as well. I mean, there are questions about the use of the data, excessive or not, and whether that the usage of data for that application that provides a lot of convenience for you, but are they within the purpose or not? So we have concerns about the purpose limitation of the application that actually it just, at first, maybe people just understands it that it will use only this set of data. But in a way, when it becomes like these AI automated services, it actually, draws a lot of data maybe from somewhere else. So that poses questions about the purpose limitation of the actual app. So that's potential drawbacks on your privacy.
Well, in terms of the laws or the guidelines, which country is ahead in ASEAN?
Well, I mean, maybe I'm stating the obvious, but I think Singapore is leading the way. I mean, not only you have a very mature data protection law, but you also have the, I believe it's called the AI governance model or the AI governance
model framework.
Yeah, model framework. So, so you're leading the way. But also, I want to mention Thailand as well, because Thailand now has 2 voluntary, even though it's voluntary, but it's still a very good step, 2 voluntary guidelines on the AI. The first one we call the AI ethics guideline, and the second one we call the AI standards guideline. So the first one, of course, talks about the ethics of the use of the AI, but then the second one talks about how do you actually implement the AI in the standards ways. For example, you have to put in the risk-based approach in place, you have to be transparent, and so on. Yeah, so that's the overview picture. I believe that in many jurisdictions of the ASEAN, they are rolling out similar guidelines as well.
So, Teck Meng, you are the practitioner on the ground, So how do you see rolling out these guidelines for all your offices, especially in Asia?
I think rolling out would be a big challenge because the understanding of how AI works is not consistent across ASEAN countries. Some are more advanced than the others. And then not only that, but also how data is being used.
Right.
So I think from hearing what Alvin actually has described about the fabulous devices, I think as a professional, practicing professional, I do have some concerns, especially how you collect the data and where does it collect, where does the data go after you have used it.
Right.
To me, data residency is actually very important. I need to know where the data is because I have to manage that. And in terms of governance, if I don't know where the data is, then obviously it will be a big challenge for me. What I'm going to do next.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, Alvin, what is your personal experience when it comes to this,
Yeah, speaking of personal experience, you can see the trend in 2024. People are launching more personalized kind of AI already, right? With Microsoft took over a company called Inflection that has AI that behaves and talks like a human being, more personalized experience. The devices I spoke to you about, these things can actually click on things on your behalf. And as it knows your preferences, can make decisions as it were on your behalf, which is why Singapore launched the recent guideline in March, which is on decision making and recommendation systems, right? And this is something that I think regulators, as just even in Thailand, what Dr. P mentioned, right, is a concern. While the move is towards more personalized experience of AI, that means they actually know a lot of your personal preferences, personal data. On the other side is that how is it being used? You need to be transparent. So that balance itself, on my end, I prefer more personalized AI because I don't explain so much things. But on the other hand, I also cognizant, one day could it like make things on behalf of me that I didn't intend.
Yep.
Yes.
And how the heck does it know that? That's the part. Could be too late. How the heck does it know that, right? I already gave up a lot of things already.
Exactly.
So the enforcement part is the important thing, right? So Dr. P, how do you enforce the rules and the guidelines,
Yeah, of course. Well, in the ASEAN member states, like we mentioned before, we have different like the mature level states of each member state. There are the ones that have the data privacy laws before has been enforced for 8 or 10 years now, like Singapore, Philippines, and Malaysia. And there are the newcomers in terms of the data privacy regulations like Thailand, Indonesia, and recently Vietnam and Brunei. So I think with these different levels of the in terms of like maturity, in terms of launching the law. Of course, I think in terms of enforcement, Singapore has the lead in terms of enforcing the cases that has the data privacy infringement. But I want to mention Thailand as well because we are only 2 years after the law has been enforced. We have although we don't have the enforcement case as of yet, but we do have the orders for the companies that are doing things wrong, and we do give them the warnings. And I have interesting stats for you that since the law has been enforced 2 years ago, we received almost 500 complaints from the people, from the data subjects, and then 50 cases has been giving out the warnings. And I believe that after the third quarter of this year, the regulator is going to enforce fines because I think it's just 2 years period of grace period, So after that, it's going to be fines. Yeah. So that's the overall picture of the enforcement.
Right. But from the practitioner's point of view, how do you ensure that whatever rules you have put in place are followed?
Well, I think this one has this is a very, very, very good question because I'm making sure people actually follow the rules.
Right.
They are not robots. Everybody thinks differently and thinks what's right and what's wrong, and perceptions are totally different.
Right.
So it's from my experience, it's always a continuous reinforcement training, which in my company we do it on an annual basis for all the employees. Okay. On top of that, what we normally do is also illustrate with live cases. Yeah, like for example, I think recently as a couple of days ago, we were informed. I was informed that from one of my DPOs that they heard from public news reports one of their insurers have been hacked.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
But then the insurer did not inform us at all. Okay. So then obviously we had to trigger our processes to find out whether our data was affected. Yeah. And basically it triggered all in my DPO because my DPO was new in the data privacy subject, and now she, because of this example, she could see all the links of all the work that we have been doing in the data privacy framework.
Right.
Like we are kind of training, we kind of procedures, we kind of processes.
Right.
Yeah. So now it's through these real life examples, things will actually go into people's brain, and they will realize what they have to do or what they should not do when protecting people's data. So it's always reinforcing training and illustrating, if possible, with real examples they can feel about it. Yeah.
Right. What has your experience been in this area?
Recently, I've been talking to a lot of, on behalf of IMDA, right, on the updates for PDPA. And the latest obligation that was enforced was called the data breach notification in your case, right? So that is interesting because many firms who have done their data protection management plan before never had this thing called the data breach plan. And there's a clock, countdown. The minute you have a data breach that is of more than 500 records and is of sensitive records, you actually have 72 hours to notify the PDPC.
All right.
Many firms will know that. Because how do you determine the thing in 72 hours, right?
Yep.
And then what do you report? So that, in a way, it's a good discipline to have because it engenders trust, right? Like you said just now, the insurance company, they will know, it's supposed to inform you. It's not, never mind the regulator, is your client, right? You are the client, and you're not well informed. So they don't have a process of data breach management already, right? So under the regulator, if it's actually more sensitive records, they will be taken to task for sure. So, but this discipline itself is important because there are more and more breaches. The time to actually notify the affected party has to do with the principle of limiting harm. That's the whole principle under the regulators. So, I think Singapore is starting to enforce that.
Discipline of informing.
Of managing the breach in a very timely manner and informing affected parties. Right? Whether it's going to be the individuals, firstly, of course, the regulator, right? Or your client, for example, so they can mitigate the harm. Because in your case, if it has to do with financial data and all this thing, then that's going to be of harm if, like, say, you all didn't even know until you read in the news that, hey, are we affected now? So it's already, the damage could be propagated even much further as you delay. Dr. P, what's your view in the region? Are you seeing other jurisdictions doing similar things?
Yeah, I think many jurisdictions are now doing and following the same path. I mean, if we're talking about the data breach notification protocols, in Thailand especially, we have the same time frame as Singapore is 72 hours. But I think what's more interesting when we talk about data breach management is when we look at the AI and how it actually, propels the whole thing to become like overboard. Because when we talk about data breaches actually accelerates with the AI. I can give you some examples. Just maybe the application that make the face scraping of people across internet. When do you know when to stop when the AI is doing that? So you don't know how much the data has been scraping, the facial recognition database of the people that the AI has been doing. So it makes the data breach management very complexing, really, when we don't know actually when to mitigate the risk. I mean, because we don't know how much the data is giving away by the AI. So I think that's very interesting when we talk about the management of the breaches.
Yeah. So once it has gone out, it's difficult to retrieve, right?
Yes, definitely. I think that is a main concept of a practitioner. Once the data goes out in on the internet, it's almost impossible for you to recover. Yeah.
Okay, so that is one challenge that DPOs need to look at.
Yes, correct. But there's very, very limited things that we can do once the data goes out. Yeah. And most what mitigation measures we adopt is to stop it from, once we discover it, stop it from giving out, divulging more of the data.
Okay.
That's all we can do.
So the discipline of managing the data breaches and then informing the parties involved, that must always be followed, right? And that is the one way that you can maybe prevent more personal data being breached.
Yeah. I think it's really awareness. Yes, because the ASEAN data privacy is still relatively new, and people are still trying to understand how they should manage their data properly. Because if you recall, like 10, 20 years ago, before we have this privacy law, our data was freely shared without any constraints, right? Yeah. And now all of a sudden you tell folks that, hey, you can't share the data anymore, and people will just wonder why I can't do it now.
It's the frequency, right? And the speed with which the data...
The technology has advanced actually make this data breach more challenging to manage.
Right. So this is an interesting topic that we can talk about, Dr. P, Teck Meng, forever, as data practitioners, data governance practitioners. But I think the important point here is that be aware that once the data is out there, it's difficult to recover. And so the discipline of managing it and informing the stakeholders and creating awareness among your staff is very important. Well, thank you, Dr. P and Teck Meng, for joining us on this series of Straits Talk.